welcome to my art form.
It's time for Post-Orthodoxy, a show about changing our minds.
Yeah, baby.
With your hosts, Dark and Ainsley Sevier.
Maybe what they believe about reality isn't all of reality.
What?
I know, right?
We're on a mission to have a better time with more people more often.
The question is more, how do you get there?
Post-Orthodoxy explores strongly held beliefs, how those belief systems divide or connect people, and what might be found beyond those reality bubbles.
Keep calm. Don't lose your head.
I've got a piece of chocolate here with me because I got anxiety about doing this.
Welcome to this neighborhood, neighbor.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Post-Orthodoxy.
It's Thursday night, 5 o'clock, Montana time.
1 p.m. in Hawaii and 1 a.m. tomorrow in South Africa and Sweden.
Yeah, that's right. Welcome to Post-Orthodoxy. Should we do the disclaimer right out the gate?
Let's do the disclaimer right out the gate. This is our 8th show, and we've been adding this disclaimer.
Yeah, some people start watching, like, I kind of like them, and then we don't do the disclaimer, and then they get upset.
Right, or they start watching, they're like, I like those conversations, but I don't like that conversation.
Right.
So
the opinions and views expressed on this program are subject to change. Future Dark and Ainsley may not agree with past or present Dark and Ainsley. And that is the point of our show. Welcome to Post-Orthodoxy. This is where we sort of explore some ideas. I'm trying to be a smarter kind of fella.
Yeah.
I'd like to learn more and grow as a human. That's kind of just the fetish.
I like learning. I like learning about people, and honestly, I really do totally get off on challenging conversations. Like if it's something that's challenging but useful, I absolutely want to have that conversation. And I know that's not for everybody. Not everybody likes having challenging conversations. Not everybody likes asking themselves if how they think reality is actually how reality is, and that's okay. We all have different cards that we're working with, you know? And I just happen to have the kind of life right now and the kind of interests right now where I like having these kinds of conversations, and I have the energy for these kinds of conversations. And I really hope some of you will join us over the course of the evening while we talk with our special guest tonight about active listening. Would you like to bring Chad on?
Yeah. Chad Okrush, do you have your mute button off? Are you with us?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
All right. Perfect.
Welcome to the show.
Good to see you.
Thank you for having me. I've been watching for a while. I've been listening for a while, and I'm honored to be here. Thank you.
Oh,
I'm glad.
I feel so official.
I'm glad that you've seen it and you are willing to be on the show.
Well, we're all getting started figuring out podcasting, right?
That's right.
And the whole spirit behind what you do is the same spirit that animates a lot of my teaching. And the subjects that I teach. So I'm thankful that I love your disclaimer. It's perfect.
Oh, is that good? You think that works out?
It's very good.
I've known you since I moved to town, since I used to host the open mic over at the Silver Dollar 7 years ago. I think I met you, and we bump into each other a bit, but we haven't really had a chance to have a drop in, and I got to read your bio that you sent for the show.
I had no idea you were a doctor.
I haven't been calling you Dr. Okrush.
Dr. Chad.
So forgive me. I just didn't know.
Yeah.
Chad, we're in the West, American West. Nobody uses those honorifics here.
I
call people doctor who aren't doctors because I like to be able to call people doctors. It makes me feel smarter to be talking to a doctor.
So really what you're saying is Chad's been jipping you.
Yeah, you've been jipping me, Chad.
Sorry about that.
I just thought you were a bitchin' musician. Like, I was just I'm friends with, like, a touring artist. It was kind of how I thought about it.
Well, I don't really know what to say about any of that.
I'm
what
glad
are your doctorates in?
I'm glad that we get to have a drop in.
Yeah.
Because it's not just passing in the bar or out at an event. We get to have a drop in. So yeah, tell our audience, introduce yourself to our audience in terms of what kind of doctor are you, doctor?
I took my Ph.D. from the University of Oregon's School of Journalism and Communication. And while I was there, I was studying human experience design. I was studying photography and digital imaging.
What is human experience design?
That experience is an organism's sensual transactions with its surroundings, its environment. So experience design, it could be anything from, designing a poster to, building a interactive space.
Wow.
Architecture is experience design. Music is experience design. Anything that's influencing the experience of somebody who's interacting with it, right?
Okay.
So for us, we focused on websites and infographics and posters and stuff like that.
Oh, good. We have a website coming out soon. We want you.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
We have a website coming out soon, so we want you to help us understand our.
You can go through it and tell us how our
experience design is.
One of the classes we teach up there is usability testing, and that's kind of the end of experience design, right? You have this idea of what your website's going to be, and then you don't know what it's going to be until you put it in in front of people and let them play with it.
Right.
Absolutely. Okay, so University of Oregon, and then how did you get to Butte?
I was born here. I was born in it would have been Silverbow General Hospital. Now it's a assisted living center on Continental Drive.
Right.
And my parents were both born here. My grandparents on my dad's side were born here. On my mom's side, they came from New Mexico in 1949. And they've been here since. They're from the Taos area. Duran, Sanchez, Trujillo.
I like that desert. It's very beautiful.
Yeah, I haven't been back, but that's also, Dark and I have had conversations about Butte as a vortex, as this place that is an interesting attractor of interesting people.
Yeah, it brings people in.
And it also spits them out, right?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So both of those things are always true. But I studied ethics and intercultural communications and focused on environmental public participation in environmental issues as my dissertation.
I'd never attended so many environmental things before I moved to Butte, and then the first couple of years I was here pre-COVID, seemed like there was some kind of meeting every month to talk about something going on or holding so-and-so accountable, or how are we going to fix the XYZ. And a lot of it was focused around how do we help the people of Butte know what's going on.
Yeah, that's exact. I got to transition from doing academic work where I was kind of looking at Butte as an anthropologist and had some distance living in Eugene for those 5 years and just observing what was going on in Superfund. And then coming home, I got to plug in. I was a member of the BNRC for 10 years. And
what's BNRC?
That's the Butte Natural Resource Damage, the Natural Restoration Fund. The BNRC doesn't map to what the committee name is, but we were a citizen panel of 8 people appointed by the governor and the chief executives to spend. At the time, it was $28 million. With interest, it became more like $36 million on restoring the central corridor of Butte and Silverbow Creek. So we were the ones who chose to spend money on removal of the tailings, and we funded a lot of science, and we hosted a lot of meetings and tried to be the facilitators of public conversations. And that's why you encountered so many meetings. It's not normal. Most places don't have this kind of social solidarity in their DNA, but of course, Butte really does. It's a part of a deep part of our history to gather together to battle more powerful and entrenched interests. It's all we've ever known.
From the unions to now.
Yeah, the story of the Berkeley pit was one of the glues that brought me to Butte. I as an artist, I'm always looking to problem solve. Everything in being an artist is, well, how do I fix that? And how do I overcome that? Or how do I achieve that? So my brain is constantly going that way. And I saw the pit and they're like, we don't know what we're doing with it exactly. I was like,
exactly.
Well, geez,
yeah.
That seems it seems like we should probably figure that out.
We should know what we're doing with it.
It's crazy in a lot of ways. I mean, your conversations are about changing your mind, and the 25-year-old me and Matt Vincent, the former chief executive, we've been best friends for a long time.
So that was like 5 years ago.
That was 20 years ago, right?
Oh.
That was 23 years.
You're supposed to just say yes 5 years ago.
Yeah, well, I wish it was 5 years ago, but it wasn't. It was in the late 1900s, and we were young. We didn't want anybody to move here and fish the Big Hole River.
Right.
We were eco-terrorists of sorts, admittedly.
Like, get off my lawn.
We were sabotaging everything we could to keep people away from here. And it was out of sheer ignorance. It was out of inexperience. Our perspective changed as we grow older and realize that we have to at least come up from the 34,000 that we've been stagnant at, somewhere in between the 90,000 when people lived here. We have the infrastructure for another 15,000 people comfortably, and we need that tax base in order to do the basic things that we want to be able to do together.
Right.
So
we do actually need more people here in order to do the things.
Yeah, in mining, we were protesting every mine, unthoughtfully,
reactionary wise.
Yeah, completely. And I was and am an environmentalist, but I'm also a pragmatist, and I drive a car and have a cell phone and use computers and rely on all sorts of infrastructure that requires that we responsibly extract things. And it's not 1872 anymore. The mining engineers that I teach at Montana Tech are not none of them have the earth first, we'll mine the rest of the planets later bumper sticker on their cars.
Right.
It's a new generation, and they're subject to new laws, and they want to do new and better things. So I'm heartened by them. Now the petroleum students, on the other hand, that's a different story.
Yeah. How is it for them? What are they?
Well, they're mostly are looking to turn a quick buck. It's at any cost. It attracts a different kind of student, and that's not that's a sweeping generalization. But I can tell you, having taught there for
many of them go into the petroleum field because it's guaranteed.
Yeah, you can see them coming.
It's a guaranteed living.
It's a return on your
my ethics classes.
Yeah.
I can see them coming from a mile away. It's very rare to have a ecologically conscious petroleum.
I was surprised to hear that Montana Tech had active listening and ethics classes.
Oh, well, I mean, they do because I push for them to. The faculty helps design the curriculum, and I think shutting up and understanding before speaking is a skill that few of us are ever taught formally, and hopefully we have a wise model in our life that demonstrates this. None of us are taught these things.
I want to go back because I don't want to lose a point, which is in your earlier days, you had more of a tribalistic sort of Butte pride. Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
And then you had a shift. Was that a gradual thing over a course of time, or were there sort of key events that made you change your mind from a more sort of reactive tribal perspective to something more nuanced and progressive. What was? Can you?
Yeah, it was a gradual thing. Part of it was born of experience of getting away and then studying home from far away and through some critical lenses. And part of it was being thrown into the actual political give and take as a campaign manager for my friend Matt, and also through my work on the BNRC, and also through Mariah's Challenge. I'm a Mariah's Challenge dad. My daughter was one of the 3 girls that was involved in that accident when we lost Mariah McCarthy. So the reality of, for example, with Mariah's Challenge, of trying to change a toxic culture's mindset, that's a difficult thing to do. You know, it's hard to be an idealist and go into that. You have to be realistic, and the world kind of beat realism into me as a young person. You know, you go with your instincts and what you think is best, and a lot of people have great instincts and that carries them through life, but some people don't, and I didn't always have great instincts in terms of the fights that I fought loudly. I was wrong about, you know. I was loud and wrong.
Well, is some of that the sort of, I guess, are you talking about that experience where you have the idea of what something is you want to do, the end result, and then you come up against the reality of having to negotiate everybody else's psyche in the world?
Well, it was partly that, and it was also an introduction to the philosophy and theories associated with complexity and the interweaving of networks. That's what complexity means. It means to weave together complexes, and if it's fractal, so at various levels, you know, as a complexity increases, your certainty decreases, and we live in a world
that's scary for a lot of people.
Yeah, it's very hard to be certain about anything, because everything, you know, as the Taoists and the Buddhists and the Hindu have taught us, is this writhing, complex, emerging, destroyed experience that we're having. It's nobody can really know all that much. That's my philosophical starting point.
Is that nobody can really know that much?
Well, that nobody can know everything, and we certainly nobody. We have to begin. It's called fallibilism. You have to begin by acknowledging that we can't know everything, and that we have something to learn about everything.
That goes
and
against
then other
sort
people
of the
have things to
1950s
teach us,
thing.
even people who, you know, by whatever measure you consider in a different category, you can learn something from anybody. My students teach me, my perspective on gun issues has evolved because my students have persuaded me over time that my initial position was not very thoughtful.
It was just a position, and you hadn't really considered all the angles.
Yeah, it was my position that I inherited from a mother who was scared of guns, you know, who was doing her best, but I didn't grow up hunting, and I was taught to fear them, and
it had never really been a thing that you'd had to confront and think about before.
No, but when I was jumped, and I had to think about the safety of my young daughter and myself, I was very thankful to know a lot of very responsible gun owners, and I was thankful for the Second Amendment. When you we're all over the place. I'm sorry, but when you dive down into the numbers, what I tend to find is that let's just take one statistic for example. We have this X number of gun shootings, gun-related deaths in the United States. Half of those are suicides every year.
Mm-hmm.
That changes. And then you look at the rest of them and you can concentrate about 85% of those in a very small geographic pinpointable area where there's a lot of gang and gun violence. And that means we need to deal with those problems.
Right.
Rather than taking everybody's guns. Also, the Second Amendment is a thing, and you can't really put the toothpaste back in the tube on that one.
Right.
Well, I feel like we are all over the place, and this is kind of why we do our show, because we're having conversations.
We're getting to know you.
And you have some expertise that I want to glean some insight on, which I'm in no hurry to get to because I'm enjoying the walk along the way.
Yeah, me too.
Do you have a thing to say about the guns thing?
I do.
Okay.
I feel like with the gun debate, it's like the abortion debate. It's like the border debate. It's often ginned up in the media to make it more partisan than it needs to be. Absolutely. Because there are strong feelings, and those strong feelings, I feel, are often engineered in the way that the stories are reported. And so there's an action, then there has to be a reaction. So one side feels like they can't let the other side get the upper hand. So there's this always sort of ramping up of rhetoric that takes you away from really the spirit of what the conversation should be about, which is what you're talking about. It's like, why are people killing each other?
Mm-hmm. Maybe
we could deal with that.
Well, no. We don't need to, because actually people just do bad things because of their sin nature.
Right.
And if you just start making excuses for people's sin nature, you're just going to go down like a perpetual slippery slope of, well, he did that because this, well, he did that because, and then nobody's taking responsibility for their actions.
Yeah, as a father of 3 daughters, I really had to work hard on suppressing my kids' sin nature so they would grow up healthy and happy. I'm joking.
Well,
we do have
many people would not be joking.
No, we do have to do the hashtag not all Christians hashtag throughout the show several times.
Yes,
because we are for those who are just turning in, we come from a very particular kind of, as I like to say, somebody slipped me a bad God when I was 4.
Right.
There's a lot of versions of the capital G God out there. There's a lot of different experiences of the capital G God out there. Mm-hmm. But there are some experiences that I are demonstrably toxic, such as yours and mine. So we are speaking from that space. Not all Christians have that experience. We ain't bagging on you if you had a good time.
It's unfortunately probably...
neither am I, and I don't intend that. But I mean to profess as a human being that without a doubt that the nature of humanity is sinful, it goes against my first step of fallibilism, right? How do you know? What do you know? Let's let the world unfold and watch it and describe it together, and then it will reveal itself.
And I think I really am glad that the Black Lives Matter movement has had this uprising of education. There are more African American books being read in the mainstream, more African American documentaries, stories about like the 13th Amendment. The 13th on Netflix is a really good, just surface level, quick look at all of the kind of awful things in the U.S. that caused our current massive state of inequality between the races, and really for me was very helpful at kind of cleaning out some of the last little bits of plaque in my brain about how, but some people are just more inclined towards violence, which is the mentality I was raised in evangelical Christianity. And at least 35% of U.S. citizens are evangelical Christians, which doesn't count lots of other conservative religious groups that have similar feelings about race. But for me, like watching the 13th on Netflix really helped me with like, people don't do bad things for no reason. Gun violence happens, especially gun suicides happen because somebody is having a hard time. People don't just do bad things because of their sin nature, and I have to sort of like smack it into my head,
Yeah, they're like we talked about the vortex before this. It's this notion of forces that are spinning out and forces that are spinning in that find each other, right? Like a tornado is a vortex. All of these things, we are both always, there is a genetic natural component that is responding to the world, but the world is affecting us too. Mm-hmm. Those two things are always true. Those two things can be true simultaneously and to various degrees and with various consequences. It's not one thing or the other. It's usually both and all sorts of other things that we don't understand.
Anna commented, confronting mental health issues in America, such as trying to address the slippery slope of why do we have gun violence, has the potential to be transformative, but it also creates a cascade of other social issues that are more difficult to solve and unfortunately partisan. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I was raised by a single mother with documented mental health issues. I myself struggle with, some trauma, childhood trauma stuff, depression, mania, bipolar in contemporary parlance, right? I have empathy because I'm one of the many people who struggle. But I see no downside to focusing our energies on finding more and better ways to help people cope with the world when they have what's in my mind is the equivalent of a diabetic chemical imbalance.
I sort of like this sort of slippery slope thing that Anna is addressing again. It's not so much that addressing mental health creates other social issues, but it brings other social issues to the forefront. Like if you mop your floor with a mop while you're standing, you're going to see a certain amount of dirt. But if you get down with a brush, you're going to see way more dirt, and you're going to have to clean it a lot longer until it becomes and that's sort of like the closer we look at mental health issues or causes of gun violence, it's like, oh, and then there's this layer, and then there's this layer underneath that, and then there's this thing underneath that, and all these issues, and it does begin to become kind of hopeless feeling like, well, but how do we fix the foster care system?
Except for when you get down to clean your floor, you don't go down there and then feel hopeless and stop. I sometimes do. You clean it. You do what's in front of you, and really, that's the best you can do. Yeah. And to tell you the truth, I don't want anybody seeing my kitchen floor right now. That was a bad metaphor. But it still holds true. Unless we're so overwhelmed by the world that we're paralyzed to act, our actions are paralyzed. We have to carry on. We have to do something, and we might as well. My whole intention is to diagnose problems so that we can intelligently respond to them. And before we can do that, we have to recognize that the problem exists. So it's recognition, diagnosis, and then some kind of analysis and response. We can recognize them by the signs and symptoms in the world of distress that appear to us, right? And this applies to broad scale environmental issues or personal psychological issues.
I wonder about what Anna Brown was talking about in terms of taking care of confronting mental health issues in America. For me, the way I see that is it's really kind of confronting America about why we're all going nuts. I feel like it's the other way around. I don't think we go out and solve mental problems and then we have to solve the problems that are created by that. I feel like people are not having a good time because of widening social, economic inequality, bad healthcare, bad mental health care, warring paradigms, media manipulation. There's a lot of serious, toxic identifiable toxic elements to our culture that I feel like trying to go out and deal with the effects of the toxicity of the culture is trying to plug a dam from the outside. Now, I think we have to be able to have compassion for people who are having a hard time mentally. Have had my struggles through my whole life, so I think it's important to be able to provide those services. But I feel like it can be like trying to plug a dam from the outside because of the pressure that is always building towards unhealth in our culture through some of these things that I just, like really divisive politics. This, like Trump, like people were literally traumatized by Trump being in office. There will be people who killed themselves because Trump was the president. Whether that doesn't matter what the reasons for all that or why they did that, just the fact that we're living in a culture where we're that extreme, I feel like that's one of those things that those are the problems that need to be addressed on the way to dealing with our mental problems.
I agree. I mean, I think you always have to work. Like if we think about this, I certainly have a genetic predisposition toward the chemical imbalances that I have, but this me that's living in Joe Biden's world is nowhere near as traumatized and stressed out as the exact same me that was just living in the environment of the last 4 years.
Right.
And therefore, that affects how we act in the world. That affects how but they're both things. We have to work on both, right? We have to work on how insane the media, social media, digital environment that we've created, which is so new that we can't adapt to it intelligently, quickly, and also treat whatever it is within us that's going out to meet the crazy world. So we're trying to reduce the crazy everywhere, right? And I say crazy loosely, knowing well that it might be a triggering word for somebody.
We've
but it's not how I mean
dropped a lot of triggering words in this episode, and I did not put a trigger warning on it. And unfortunately, because it's live, there's not really anything I can do about that.
Right.
Well, I hope you know that I don't. Partly, I'm becoming an old man, and sometimes I say things that embarrass my children.
Oh,
yeah.
That's one thing That's one thing I wanted to talk to you about because you're standing in front of a classroom full of late teen, early 20-year-olds. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So,
for years,
how are they?
Longitudinal perspective over this.
Yeah. So you're looking at these folks coming in. How do they get their information in the world? Do they have the same feelings as you did about the nightly news? Because there's no nightly news anymore, right? It's just a 24
they don't
news
even know
schmear.
what the nightly news is.
Right. Like how do they get their information? How do they orient themselves in the world? Because
that's interesting because
go ahead.
Every one of it. It's the first time in history where a mass culture where everybody gets their information in a unique way. It's curated. Whereas when we were growing up, it was Tom Brokaw, Dan Rather. It was 3 channels and whatever was on the radio and in our local newspaper.
Walter Cronkite.
And everybody was reading those things.
Yeah, there were 3 channels.
It was a shared experience. And right now there's a fragmentation of common experience. I ask my students this, and I'm a professor in communication and media studies in a technical communication program. So we're thoughtful about media and media as a channel through which we create the world, but also as ones that form the world, right? Marshall McLuhan and whatnot.
Right.
So they all get it from different places. They all get it and usually it's through some form of social media. And it's fed to them by algorithms. so they're not seeking things. They're mostly responding to what the code sends them. And that code is incendiary. Those algorithms are looking for clicks, and they're the things that make people click.
Whatever keeps you engaged.
Yeah.
Whatever keeps you on Facebook.
I get my news from this website called allsides.com.
Right. Yes. We shared that on our
There's
show
a ranking system for it where they rank things from far left, center to far right. And they discuss also, they go into detail on who's doing the rankings and how they determine them. So you can look at the methodology, but I trust it. But I don't even know where I was going with that in terms of my point.
We were talking about the kids and how they get their information because
how they get their information. Nobody's triangulating across far left, far right, and center right now. Everybody is, as your
just watching your team or watching your team,
creating their own bubble.
Yeah.
Right.
And then happily living in their own bubble because they're fed all of the stuff. What I was going to tell you is that I get my news from all sides, and so I wanted to go straight center on my news consumption for a little while. I did it for a week. So fucking boring.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
What's boring?
It's boring. I watch Reuters, and they're right down the middle, and I just go to sleep.
Yep.
So
we talked about
there's a reason why we, as humans, those news stories.
Yeah.
They stir up our reptilian brain.
Jesse Gonzalez says, I'd say it boils down to money. Buzzwords create strong reactions, and those reactions lead to profit. If you can incite someone's rage, you can get them to buy whatever you're selling.
That's it. Well, even more than that, you can sell advertising to people who are trying to get you to buy whatever it is they want.
Jim Ward's standing out there taking a picture in our street.
What?
I don't know. He's taking a picture down the street. Anyway, just something that happened randomly while we're doing the show. No, look, right there in the window.
I believe you.
Okay. So I'm fascinated by the media stuff. I don't know if you know who Matt Taibbi is. I talked about his book, Hate Inc., Hate Incorporated. He used to work for the Rolling Stone. He realized that they just wanted him to do stories about Trump. Doesn't matter if it's good or bad, just do stories about Trump because that triggers everybody's amygdala and we get clicks.
Exactly.
And so, I'm tending to follow writers who have been calling it. People like Glenn Greenwald, Matt Taibbi, several different, like The Intercept, some of these things that had a little bit more of a critical take on what was being considered reality. And I'm at the point now where I'm paying $5 a month to be privy to that guy's feed to support him because
good journalism costs money.
Are not getting supported because that long, in-depth, investigative style is it's just cheaper to do the clicks. So there are people doing good work, but you have to actually want the good work and go find it. And it can be boring, but I think it's like if you're raised on junk food, whole wheat bread tastes terrible.
Yeah.
Until you start to have a relationship with that.
You get the sugar crack out of your system.
Right. Then you really like the taste of brown bread suddenly.
You can enjoy the nuttiness.
Or not suddenly, over time. And that's what happens is people go for the clicks. And are you familiar with the sort of the technocrats, the idea of the technocrats and the technocracy, which is if you're into conspiracy stuff, that's what everything is going on right now is they want to hybridize us into robots, like a la the Matrix. So there's the idea that technology is going to be our savior. We're going to solve all our problems with technology. And then there are other people who are afraid of that idea because they fear it will cause us to lose our humanity. So
my undergraduate degree at Montana Tech was called Society and Technology Studies. And my mentor there is somebody who you should bring on to explore those issues. Pat Monday.
Oh, yeah. All right. So we have
Monday. I mean, that guy, he's one of my heroes. And in terms of multiple intelligences, he's a kind of genius in that area. What you're talking about, I mean, it means a lot to me too, and I've studied it, but man, you'll get a lot more depth if you go exploring with Pat. He's a great interview too, I bet.
Yeah, I'm interested in that idea, the fear of change. And part of me, I try to see both sides of the technocracy conversation. So some people are like, I want to be able to download every memory I had that day. I don't want to have
all
the
the
fallibility of my brain anymore.
Yeah, all the languages.
Right. I want to take some RNA pills and become like Einstein, whatever.
Yeah.
Plus, there's the beautiful, hopeful aspects of like being able to have bionic limbs and being people who cannot talk to be able to have some scalar wave interface where they can now finally have a voice.
We're getting close to a lot of this.
It's all happening right now.
Faster and faster. I mean, the rate of technological innovation is absolutely mind blowing at this moment in history. And I was a tech guy for years. I used to teach web design and run computer networks, and I ran away from that to grad school, and then didn't tell anybody I knew anything about it. So
right,
I have a good framework for it, but I definitely am glad I changed my life's direction, because I would have been techno boy forever.
Techno boy. That's the
media.
The other side.
Oh no, techno boy.
Yeah, the other side of that is that it will cause us to lose our humanity, right? So yeah, and so maybe one perspective is, well, humanity is ever growing and changing, and exponentially. So it seems like the next logical step would be machine interface, and I can understand how that's terrifying.
It's also cool. I mean, every handheld device you could have since the
oh my God,
mid 90s, I've had.
Yep.
I'm first on board for them, and it's here again. Always, you have to critically assess both the dignities and the disasters associated with whatever utopian vision or dystopian vision somebody is putting out there. Technology in and of itself isn't good or bad.
Right.
But evolution is evolution. And what humans will eventually become, unless the grid goes down, is destined to be some sort of cyborg.
Seems to be the case.
Can I go back to the whole news thing? Because it kind of sounded like...
We are all over the place, aren't we?
But
it's okay.
Towards the top of the hour, I want to talk about, we probably should have talked about active listening before we started talking to each other, but I want to get to that towards the top of the hour. But yes, please.
Yes.
Are
you guys saying that when you were growing up?
Yes.
That
not you.
that there was not partisan news, that everybody watched the same channel?
The illusion was neutrality.
Yeah.
They were still acting as if it was a real fourth estate.
It was the news.
It wasn't the right news and the left news.
It's never been. I mean, we harken back to a golden era of objectivity, but there was really only about 20 years where that was true, and it was in from the 50s to the early 70s, before concentration of media ownership and digitization of an increased kind of number of cable channels. But for a while there was 20 years where people like Walter Cronkite, where everybody in America trusted him.
Yeah, everybody trusted.
To
how could
tell
you not
you
trust
the
that
straight
guy?
story.
Everybody in America.
Yeah.
Everybody.
Generally,
everybody
yes.
in America liked the same news guy.
Yes. People trusted him. You saw him. You only saw him for 20 minutes.
You didn't get to decide, like, oh, if you watch Walter Cronkite, you must be on such and such team.
No,
because there was those guys were the immediate products of a new focus in the professionalization of journalism in the 40s and 50s under the Hutchins Commission, where those values were instituted, the values of neutrality, objectivity, truth-seeking, protection of sources.
Actually,
all of those things were instituted only 80 years ago, and it only lasted until the media environment changed to such a degree that it just fragmented in these million ways.
Damon brought up a good point that now with these newses all over the place, we have all kinds of news. Like you said, quote unquote, kids these days get a lot of their news from social media, whatever happens to be being regurgitated on Facebook by somebody resharing a news article from somewhere else, or more than likely just the headline of the news article, because it's almost impossible to read any good news articles without paying for a subscription anymore. And so there's no one story that the U.S. is getting, but we are all still interacting with each other as if we're all getting the same story about what's going on. Like, well, but how could you even believe that? And it's like, they don't hear about that stuff. They're not hearing, this team, whatever it is not hearing about the things that you're hearing about. My siblings had no idea most of the stuff Trump said, because they do not watch news that shows the rude things that he says. They only watch news that show the smart diplomatic presidential things that he says. So they don't know.
I have to walk back my earlier statement because my conservative students all had Fox in common.
Fox in common, right? Fox,
yeah,
right.
Yeah, Fox in common. And at the end, the shift to even more conservative platform. So but that's the 35%, that tribe of 35% who Trump can do no wrong for. As long as Trump
he
was
saves
talking
the
about
babies.
Fox and Friends was where they went. My dad is one of them. We all know people who, if the TV's on, it's on Fox, and that's what they listen to. Whereas if you're not a Fox conservative, if you're a Goldwater or a Reagan conservative or a Romney conservative, you really don't have a whole lot of options. And if you're liberal, you have a million.
We have several news channels that are like liberal news that give a particular spin on all the stories from a liberal
perspective. And to varying degrees. But not everybody's watching, Rachel Maddow.
No, Fox gives the impression of, I feel like what Fox does is it is the voice of the underdog. That's how they speak to their audience. Because they're just the one lone corporate media voice.
It hasn't been stomped out.
And all that other liberal media, it gives a sense of tribalism. It gives a sense of...
Because there's only one.
Of like, we're special because we're the only ones that really get it and know what's going on.
And everything else is fake news.
Right, exactly.
And then that response becomes automatic and stifles any sort of critical thought or truth-seeking together.
But there's a grain of truth in the fake news thing, which I think is really problematic. Because
now we're all like, fake news isn't real. And it's like, no, but it really is.
No, when Trump says all those other networks are fake news, then there is an amygdala reaction in the liberal-minded people who say it is not. And then they're not critical of their media sources anymore. They defend their media sources. So the liberal left used to be sort of like really suspicious of the CIA until Trump started talking about the deep state. Now suddenly we
are not suspicious
is
anymore.
Like, we love the CIA. Like, wait a minute, what is happening?
We just have to be not whatever they say.
Whatever they say, it's so bad and dangerous. And so there's a quote I wanted to read on this media thing. I guess it can be applied to the media thing. One of my favorite authors, a guy named Robert Anton Wilson. This is a quote of his. The border between the real and the unreal is not fixed, but just marks the last place where rival gangs of shamans fought each other to a standstill.
I love that. I love that. I love that for a bunch of reasons. I mean, one of them is that if you have been my student in freshman seminar over the last 15 years, the first day of my introduction to our degree area was to let them know that they're shamans, to let them know that what we do as communicators and technical communicators in particular is to live in multiple worlds and pass messages back and forth.
Yes.
Right? and you can do that with an engineer and a public, right? You can do that with a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioner and somebody who doesn't know Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Whatever it is. I love that quote, Dark. That's beautiful.
I look at it in the context of our current media landscape, is that we don't have a reality right now. The rival gangs of shamans are not at a standstill. We are in the middle of a big battle of rival shamans. And I think they're oligarchical entities. Like, all the oligarchs aren't in the same club. There's oligarchs fighting oligarchs, just like Godzilla and King Kong, that we don't see that. We don't see that battle, even though they're the biggest battles going on the planet. I think there's reality is really unsteady, and I think that has to go back to our mental health discussion. Reality is really unsteady.
It's not the same thing everywhere, and a lot of people keep trying to fight for it to be the same thing everywhere, and it's not, and then you're distressed anytime somebody suggests that maybe reality isn't the same thing everywhere.
No, people are clinging to these shreds of reality that are not coherent the way they were when we watched Walter Cronkite on the news. And that could have been...
There was a certainty and a trust in the integrity of the deliverer of the news. And also the shared experience, somebody who has led the country through mourning of the passing of a president and Martin Luther King and real reporting on the Vietnam War. When the government was saying one thing, CBS News was saying something different, and it was the integrity of like, I watch CNN with the same trepidation as I watch Fox, even though my values tend to align with the editorials and opinions of those who work for CNN, because I think it's their job to do something different than they're doing. It's to seek the truth.
That's not the current business model.
No. Yeah. So Cole Orton is in the UK. He's tuning in with us on Twitch.
Hi, Cole.
He's in England. I'm guessing it's Cole Orton. It's all just one. It might be Cole Orton. But I'm gonna go with Cole.
Okay.
He said news media today is a total jest. Now I see why tyrannical nations like North Korea or China censor or outright ban the media. If you want stability, you've got to follow other countries' policies of banning and censoring news media. Everything be a double-edged sword. I've heard that theory before, that like if the Fourth Estate isn't going to do what the Fourth Estate is supposed to be doing, which is be a check and balance on the government and business, then let's just admit, like, we know people from Russia and China who are like, we know not to trust the news in our country because we know it's being funded and led by the government and business.
Yeah.
But in the U.S., we're still all acting like our news isn't driven by politics.
You can't have commercials on the news.
Yeah, you should not.
You can't have commercials on the news.
The closest thing that, I told you Reuters is boring, but it's down the middle. I still have some faith in the integrity of a lot of what I encounter in the public radio, news dimension, PRI, PRX.
BBC.
What are those things?
NPR, and people rate those. If you look at how those are rated on the allnews.com, it's down the center. But Republicans and Fox News watchers see them as public-funded voices of the left.
They're definitely different mindsets, and I think they go into actual different parts of the human experience. People who watch Fox are having a different experience than.
I'm thankful for podcasts for this very reason, because I can get on and do a deep dive, listen with a panel of 2 or 3 experts that talk for 2 hours about something.
Yes, on a topic.
We don't get that on the news with when you have these minute-long segments to say something profound.
Or the same thing that was said 15 minutes previous before the Tide commercial.
Exactly.
Glenn Sothergill is wondering, does trust stem from familiarity necessarily?
I think I think when he was talking about Walter Cronkite, if I may, when he was talking about Walter Cronkite being this guy who had walked us from national tragedy to national tragedy for a couple of decades, when he talked about John F. Kennedy dying, he was having a real emotional reaction to that event. So when you followed him every night on the news as a ritual, he was kind of a part of your family.
Yeah.
Because he had told you that this was a somber moment in his delivery. He wasn't talking heading it. He was really just delivering information, and it had a slant. It was America, so there was some eyebrow raising around the communists or whatever.
It came from a capitalist.
Yes, it came from that perspective. But that guy was somebody in your living room every night. So I think that familiarity does lend itself to trust.
I like Glenn's question. Hello, Glenn. The trust, I would say that trust comes from familiarity over time, a demonstrated familiarity, and there are different definitions. My favorite definition of faith is the definition of faith as trust. Faith as falling back into something that you believe in with all of your heart. It doesn't mean necessarily you have to believe it without reference, to evidence of some sort. That's one definition of faith. But faith as trust, most Americans have little or no faith in the news apparatus as it exists today.
Yeah, I think does trust come from familiarity? You could look at that sentence several different ways. Do we trust things because we are familiar with them? Like, I'll use a negative example, people that are cyclically in abusive relationships because that relationship style was imprinted on them as a child. And so it's the most familiar kind of way of being in a relationship with someone, and it makes them feel like they're having a good time because it's familiar.
Yeah.
And so they trust people they shouldn't trust.
Well, it squishes
the counter
out
is also
particular
true that,
chemicals in the brain.
At least in my own experience, I have trusted people that I did not know.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, and also I think as far as talking about wherever you get your news from, if you've been getting your news from MSN for a decade, you're probably going to keep getting your news from MSN.
MSNBC.
Yeah. Whatever. It's MSNBC.
Yeah, I looked it up.
Right, NBC, MSNBC.
I looked up because even though this is a real thing, it still seemed unreal to me that the main news network is called Microsoft
NBC.
Right.
NBC. So it's a
like we're all aware that's happening.
It's a company owned by an oligarch. NBC.
Right. But also NBC. The history of NBC is really interesting because at one point they were owned by GE.
Yes.
Oh my God.
While Westinghouse owned CBS. So we have these nuclear arms manufacturers that own the media.
Can't be good.
And at the very same time that the Hudson River, you think that the Superfund site, the Berkeley Pit, is a big mess. What General Electric did to the Hudson River pales in comparison, and it was carcinogens. It was PCBs. So the question I asked while I was in grad school is, how did NBC cover GE's Superfund issues on the Hudson? And the answer is they didn't. And neither did CBS cover it because Westinghouse had the same deal. So
you just didn't know.
The press is only as free as their corporate owners. There's truth to
So that's my beef with MSNBC. I mean, it's owned by Microsoft, which again,
how many people know that?
So it's really funny. So
I only found that out like 2 weeks ago. I was like, so wait, if there's NBC, which was something we would sing in college to learn what a major sixth is, We had like a whole. We did.
That helps me understand what a major 6
Now you'll
is.
never wonder. We had I'll go through my list of ditties with you later because we had one for every interval.
I love that.
To help us remember. Tritone is la da 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 da. La, da, 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 da. So if you're listening to some music and you're trying to write it down for a test or something, you can hear and sing it, and you're like, oh, that's NBC. That's major 6. Like that. So then I was like, well, so wait. Is MSNBC like its sister or something? Like, why are there 2? And then Dark was like, we should look that up. And it's like, oh, God, it's Microsoft.
Yeah. I kind of knew it was, but it's like
I
just don't actually want to admit that's what it is. It's probably that sounds like Microsoft News NBC, but
that can't be real.
Really, they're not that obvious yet, but
they are.
And I just let it slide for a couple of decades, and then I had to look it up, and I'm like, oh.
I remember very well that merger, between NBC and Microsoft, because I lived in that tech bubble, and it was a big deal, and all of a sudden, actually, not too long after that, it precipitated like the next generation of web design. Because you had Microsoft at the front end of news distribution, and it changed the way we did things. We went from, you remember the first websites to MSNBC and MTV websites where things that people had never seen before.
Well, it is the top of the hour now. Suddenly, we've wiled away a whole hour getting to know you, which is lovely for me because I don't think we've ever had a very long conversation. I
appreciate this too.
I really like it, and our listening friends have been contributing some awesome conversation starters.
Yeah.
I guess I'll take this moment while everybody's still here to thank all of the people that helped us create this studio.
Yes.
We would not be here without you guys, and thank you to our lurkers because we know you're out there not commenting for whatever reason you have, and that's fine.
The website that you put up there as allnews.com, it's supposed to be allsides.com.
Oh, what was I? I was
all
listening
sides.
to several things at once.
Yeah, all sides.
Yeah, so sorry about that.
Actively listening.
We shared that. That was something that we were going over in season 2 of Post-Orthodoxy. We were trying to figure out where do you get your news, and All Sides News was one of the things that we were talking about last season. That, and I find kind of all 3 sides boring. Like now, like like all
I'm
3
glad
sides.
To be bored.
Like
I've never been so happy to be bored.
That's what coloratone.
When I say
UK
boring,
said.
I just mean kind of predictable. So before we go to the active listening thing, I'm going to say one thing.
Okay.
My friend Laszlo, when I was 24 in Los Angeles in the 90s, he came over from Hungary, Budapest. And he's like, you guys are crazy. You guys are watching news with commercials on it. I'm like, well, where did you get your news? And he's like, well, the government paid for it. And I'm like, is that any better? And he's like, well, yeah, because we know it's coming from the government.
We know it's
the same thing. And and it just struck me suddenly that I was,
here we all pretend it's not being influenced.
During the debate, 2016 debate, Bernie Sanders is on stage. There's this whole, the debate has become there shouldn't be commercials on a debate. Okay, just have commercials before and after if you want to, but let us watch the damn exchange of ideas without having to look at Taco Bell or a pharmaceutical company or something.
They just play Sound of Music in between when they all go take potty breaks or something.
Yeah, I was going to do.
In America, we act like it's the inevitable model.
God,
but
no.
In Canada and Britain, they do something completely different.
Exactly. I was taking notes for that debate because I was actually talking about politics online back then before I lost all my friends. So I decided to I'm going to do a review of how they're going to treat Bernie in this debate because I definitely had a bias that I was after and I was going. And then there's a break in the commercial and some slick talking head guy with the hairspray, he turns and he says, whoa, we got to stop. We have to go to a commercial or the machine will break down. And I was like, that's the most honest thing I've ever seen on network news. We have to go to our advertisers or the machine will break down. I was like,
wow. To the man behind the curtain.
Holy cow.
He just said it. Maybe they were supposed to cut before he said that part and that was just supposed to be a joke for the oligarchs on stage.
It's just like every top 40 radio station where the morning show guy talks about how you really don't like your wife. What is that all about? What's that
Why
zeitgeist?
are we all you hate your job, you hate your wife, but this country music is really going to
It's going to get you through it.
Yeah. Because guess what? We all hate our wives and our jobs. So
Yeah.
it's fine.
Listen to my station. Anyway, let's talk about active listening.
Yes, Chad.
I want to know
ironic,
about your.
isn't it?
I want to know about your course.
Yeah.
And what skills you're teaching the kids these days.
How did you come upon it, and why?
Well, it's interesting. I've been teaching my Ph.D. is in communication. My master's is in communication. I've never taught interpersonal communication until this semester, and because of the retirement of one of my colleagues, that class was open, and so I asked if I could teach it, and I took it, of course, as an undergraduate, and I took versions of it as a graduate student, but I had never taught it, and it was really a revelation to me. I mean, it was kind of getting back to basics. It's about how we create the world together in dyads, just one-on-one. And as I was doing my survey of the literature to pick out textbooks and to outline this course I had never taught, there was a convergence on several topics, but one of those topics was in every text was listening, was active listening. And that reminded me of my interpersonal communication course. So I would not say by any stretch of the imagination that I'm an expert in active listening, but I can talk. I can speak about it intelligently.
Dunning-Kruger effect.
Means to an end.
Yeah, Dunning-Kruger effect right there. You're probably the person I want you to explain it to me right there. Because if you're like, you know what, I know everything about active listening and I'm here to dial it in for you, I would not believe anything you're saying. So.
The Dunning-Kruger effect is a hypothetical cognitive bias that people with low ability at a task overestimate their ability. They assume they're probably pretty good at it. And people who are very, very good at a task are aware enough about that task to know that they're probably not the best at it. And
that it's more complex than they know, right? Yeah, I think I've come across that bias in a rhetoric class. So that's pretty cool that you guys immediately recognized it.
It's just like, it's one of those tools that like I downloaded one day and was like, oh my God, I see the whole world through Dunning-Kruger now. Like, shut up. You shut up.
Everywhere.
You can stop talking right now. I already know where you are on the spectrum. I'm out.
Well, I think probably the best way to get into it is to let's consider the difference between hearing and listening. I mean, how would you guys define the difference between hearing and listening?
I think you hear words and then you listen to meaning.
Okay. That
would be my initial.
Hearing can happen passively, and listening is something that you choose to do.
They're both very insightful. Hearing is the actual biophysical sensory, right? Oh. It's how our ears work. It's what our ears do. But listening is an intentional, mindful, self-guided cognitive process. You choose to listen. You can't help but hear, right?
Right.
Right. So what you said, Ainsley, is right on the money. It's a choice. It's when we care about something, we attend to it mindfully. So the whole notion of active listening is to shut up and listen. Is to set aside any goal that you have that we normally have in the back and forth of a conversation. A lot of times we have this game metaphor or a war metaphor where we're trying to win a game or be right or more right or prove that somebody else is wrong. But if you're actively listening, then you're just you quiet your mind to try to understand the perspective of another person. And I think we got on this because I told you about an exercise I had my students do, which was to think of the person in their life that they have the most trouble communicating with, that and that they really don't enjoy conversing with, and to shut up and listen to that person for a half hour,
That's
to
a
ask them
massive
questions about something that they believe in, and not to challenge them, but just to continue to ask questions to figure out why they believe what they believe. And that was absolutely, for me, it was mind-blowing to see the results of their experiences and their learning summaries, because everybody saw the benefit in it, and it has the potential to change future conversations moving forward with these people that they normally are just always at loggerheads with, because they're trying to win a war.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Glenn Suthergill is wondering what else interferes with active listening.
Oh, well, a lot of things. I mean, Glenn probably knows the answer to the question. But
one of them is her having to answer Glenn Suthergill while she's trying to listen to Chad Okrush.
Oh, damn. It's okay, Glenn.
There's a concept in a concept of noise, which is defined as anything that impedes the communication process. And there's internal noises, so it could be, the chattering of your skull because of anxiety that you're having or trouble that you're having in a relationship, so you're not attending to what's in front of you. Then, or maybe in Butte, jacked up 4x4 drives by and blows his pipes out while you're talking. So there's that literal notion of noise that can interfere with active listening. But the other thing I think is losing focus. If you're like me, I mean, I'm like a golden retriever. I'm all over the place, and it takes me twice as long to do anything as it does most people. And when I took the listening quiz, like the interpersonal communication quiz with my students at the beginning of the term, what it told me was that you're good, a lot about communication, and you're good at writing and speaking, and maybe you should listen more. So it's not lost on me.
How was that?
How do I do that quiz?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I can send it to you.
Cool.
Yeah.
That would be exciting. Is that some like copyrighted material of yourself that you've made for your students?
No. This is it's an online resource that I just used in my class.
That's cool.
And I think it's from Psychology Today.
How was that effect on you when you realized, okay, maybe I need to listen more?
Well,
the
confirmed what I already knew. I had written an essay in 2017, right after about a year after the elections, which hit me pretty hard, because I was running Matt Vincent for his second term and we lost. And also I didn't want Trump to win. And I think I was losing friends quickly on social media and in the world. I had actually been punched once, sucker punched. Somebody hit me.
Wow.
And I wrote an essay about it. You can find it on my website, chadokrush.com, and it's in the blog section. But it's basically it's why can't we figure out how to seek truth together? Because what we're doing is not helping. It's only hurting things. And so I've been trying to be thoughtful about this for a long time, but I also know that I can be overbearing, know-it-all, especially with a couple of drinks in me. And if I'm taking my Adderall, then I know everything. Right?
Uh-huh.
So does that help you? Does Adderall help you feel more confident?
It does exactly what it's supposed to do. Yeah. It helps me focus, but it also, I think I become louder. I become it's not a version of myself that I would want to talk with, you know, especially about topics where that was the whole first part of this essay. I'll send this to you too. Was that it was a mea culpa. I'm sorry for my part in this, because I know I've been loud. I've been a know-it-all. I've exaggerated my position. I've devalued yours. I've done all of the things. I've treated you like a bumper sticker, you know, that I can do better. We can do better.
Who were you writing that to?
To Butte. It was in the Butte Weekly.
Okay. I like them. And so you were recognizing.
Yeah, and to myself, it was come to Jesus moment for me, you know, as well. So I was not surprised when I saw that result on the thing. It says maybe you should. My daughters would definitely tell you the same thing.
Right.
That's interesting, because usually it's the girls that are stereotyped as the chatterboxes.
Also, as stereotyped as passive.
I guess depending on whichever generation you're talking to.
So, you know, as I was looking more into this for the class, I just realized how important mindful attention to the person in front of you is. You know, it's the I thou thing from Martin Buber. It's, you know, you go from I, it, to where you're just something out there, to I, thou, I, you and I are in the same world. And I value you because you exist and you're here with me now.
I think that's really key to communication. There's a line from Robert Anton Wilson, which is the only true communication is that between equals. And that's something I've had rattling in my head for decades, but I've had some experiences more recently that I think have sort of crystallized that a little further for me, which is really people want to be seen.
Yes.
And people will be more verbose. They will be more argumentative, more warlike in their dialogue if they feel like they're trying to get you to see them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think being able to establish some sort of common awareness of each other before the words or in the midst of the words, because we start to otherize each other when we don't feel seen. We are not seeing that other person.
Yeah, absolutely. And I come from a people who have been invisible. And I've watched people my Hispanic grandfather, or my mother who's dealing with her own issues, or my brothers. They tend to treat me a little differently because of social status associated with my profession or with music. But I came from I'm very cognizant of that. Consequently, and this is one of the things that ends up coming out in my intercultural communication class at the end of the day, is that humility, of being humble and curious. If you are both humble and curious, there's really no way to fuck it up.
Yes.
You go into the world and you treat people like human beings, and you ask questions about their life because you actually give a shit. That changes everything, whether it's a cab driver or, the person who's serving you food in a small village in China where I lived for a little while. People are people everywhere you go, and everybody wants to be seen, and everybody wants to be acknowledged as human.
Yeah, I think that really greases the pathway towards actual communication versus talking.
you get toward authenticity, right? You get to just acknowledge and appreciate somebody for who they are without any sort of outside reference or judgment to whatever systems you inhabit.
I can feel parts of myself. I'll think of my own brain for a second. I can feel parts of myself wanting that there is a high that comes from sort of the Adderall and 2 drinks, or the zealot mode, where you're excited about your information, you're excited about your discoveries, you're excited about some philosophy, your own satori or understanding, you're excited about it, and so you want to share it.
Yeah.
I think there's a drug that comes from that, but I'm only now, like at 52, starting to realize that maybe there's another less taxing high. And when I mean taxing, on the people around you.
Right. I resemble that remark.
When you start asking questions, and it's not an easy river for me to fjord yet.
But I mean, I'm with you, and I'm
on stage.
I'm 48, and I'm just figuring it out too.
Especially when we're all
studying it.
We're all really excited about talking with each other about this thing. So all 3 of us are like, but
blah, 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 blah. Yeah.
Nobody's actively listening.
No,
but we are in an excited way, and I think I don't want to be too harsh on myself for not being like a Zen monk suddenly. But I want to slowly be able to integrate, like the middle path news on whatever All Sides News. Like it may be a little boring, but it actually might be a little more nutritional. And it's been thinking a lot about, people pay a lot of attention to the calories or whether it has wheat or not. And yet they don't seem to pay the same. I don't see a lot of people paying the same amount of attention to what they're putting in their own cognition. Like they're willing to take a sort of like, I got a problem with corporate media. I feel like it's not the most nutritional thing for our heads as a society. So I feel like I would like to maybe try to, for myself, I'm just trying to think of it in terms of nutrition. Like I love conspiracy theory
stuff. It's funny that you say that because I think
much.
Glenn can attest to this. A while ago, I was on the General Education Council for Montana University System, and I was trying to encourage them to have the equivalent of the nutritional value on food on classes. So that it showed, these are the things that are associated with a critical thinking and liberal arts education, right? You're exposed to cultures, geography, science, critical thinking. I'd like to see on a class that this one's high in critical thinking and geography and culture. I would like to see those.
Oh, this is
so your nutritional metaphor makes sense to me.
Dark.
What's that?
You're
sorry, I'm not actively listening.
Well, I interrupted your flow just to agree with the metaphor, and
that this is what we can all
I
be
totally
friends.
wasn't actively listening because of our interaction with our friend Glenn Zothergill.
Yeah.
What's Glenn asking?
He said, humble and curious, a very productive stance.
Exclamation
Does
point.
it disarm some of the skepticism or trigger it?
And I was wanting to know, does he mean in yourself disarm skepticism? Or if I'm humble and curious, do I disarm skepticism in other people? Oh, and honestly, I do know.
Well, I think that's actually a good question. I mean, I think to be a critical thinker, there needs to be a healthy skepticism, even with those you were speaking to, with humility, in a curious way. You have to, and it doesn't disarm skepticism to me. It may trigger it, but hopefully it would trigger a healthy version of it, not the kind of the radical skepticism.
Oh man,
Right.
I totally know people who diss me because I am like nice. I'm nice.
That is a Gibson J45 in the background.
That's what he was wondering. Zachary Gray on YouTube is like, is that a Gibson J45?
That's my baby, Zachary.
What's your other one?
That is an American-made Stratocaster.
Okay.
Fender.
Cool. That's exciting. Yeah, so I totally do know people who, because I am generally pretty curious and pretty nice as a person, they are disarmed or offended, or
that you're not critical enough, or you're too happy.
They assume I don't know what I'm talking
about. So you're an idiot.
About.
You're an idiot if you're happy.
Yeah, if I'm happy, then I must not know how shitty everything actually is, and so my opinion means nothing.
Yeah, the happy idiot is a thing cross-culturally. If you're walking around smiling and saying hi to everybody, in most cultures, they think
you must not know.
They worry about
because we're all having a bad time.
Yeah, they worry about it. But I'm the happy idiot wherever I go, so I'll wear that.
I like that the idea of being able to. Brian Von Osten said he agrees with the ingredients list on course descriptions.
Let's make it so.
Oh yeah,
local legislature. Let's go.
Yeah, this idea of being humble and curious. Like I think there's for me, there are these little mnemonic tricks that I use to try to figure out what I'm doing in the world. And for a while, I came from a judgmental background. Everything was judgment, very hard, Old Testament style-y. It's right or wrong. There's no in between. And then I decided maybe that wasn't a good idea when I was in my 20s. I'm like, maybe that's not a good idea. I was in LA.
What do you mean you decided that wasn't a good idea?
I thought,
what does that mean?
Maybe there's more than just yes or no. Maybe there's maybe. Maybe there's gray area. Maybe there's a spectrum. So I decided, and it didn't work out very well. I decided not to judge anybody or anything.
Right. That can get you in trouble too.
It got me in a lot of trouble.
You were misunderstanding the true definition of the word judgment.
Well, I was misunderstanding a lot of things. Not only that, but and then to sort of have to recover from that baldinger, I actually realized that I could have discernment.
Yes.
I didn't just have to let everything be, man. Because sometimes, like, I'm just not going to let the snake be and then go try to pick it up. I can, like judge it. Like, I don't judge you, snake.
You're not judging him morally.
I don't have a moral judgment on you wanting to maybe bite me if I get too close to you. That I don't have any judgment, but I do discern that I don't want to do that.
Right. Yeah, you're evaluating your judgment.
Right. Coleroton.
Yeah.
I mean, Cole Orton. Coleroton in the UK says, being a fan of history, Marcus Aurelius has a few amazing quotes. The object of finding life is not to be on the side of the majority, but to escape finding oneself in the ranks of the insane. Marcus
Aurelius.
Marcus Aurelius also says, everything we hear is an opinion, not a fact. Everything we see is a perspective, not the truth. That is something I have been harping on for a long time.
I would color that or maybe complexify it a little bit, because some of the things that we hear are indeed facts, and some of the things that we encounter are indeed truths. But philosophically we make a distinction between objectivity and subjectivity. Objectivity kind of is the God trick of every perspective, everywhere, every when. If you could know everything about something, you can have an objective understanding of that thing. Subjectivity has to do with your unique perspective on anything, right? Yeah. So human beings are subjects, but I like the idea of intersubjective understanding, where we'll never be able to perform the God trick because we're not God. But
wait, what's the God trick?
Objectivity
of knowing everything about everything from every perspective. But if we surround in class, I hold up a coffee mug in the middle of class and it has writing on it, and from every perspective it says something different. So everybody has a unique look at it, but that look is limited, right? When we start talking to each other and describing it openly and honestly, then we surround it. and we can have a broader understanding than any of us alone.
It's the modern
intersubjectivity is the best that we can do, and I think that's what science is too. I mean, that's what.
So the coffee cup is the modern hipster version of the ancient elephant story.
Right. The elephant story.
Yeah, it could be. Yeah, it could be.
So Gilbert Gilroy, chiming in from Helena, left a long Krishnamurti quote, which I do like Krishnamurti.
I reshared each paragraph individually so everybody on the chat can see the whole thing.
Oh,
Because
good,
when it's
good.
super long.
It goes, right,
you
right.
just lose the top half of it. So.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm going to have to read that after the show because I'm actively listening to Chad right now. But I appreciate it. I appreciate the thing.
Yes.
I'll actively read that later. I can only do it. She can do both. She can like read stuff, comment, stay in the dialogue.
It's part of their generation, Dark.
I can't do it.
That's right.
See, I put you in a different generation.
Oh, you otherized me.
Totally a different generation.
I am a different generation. How dare you describe my actual way of living? Of my
multitask.
Yeah. Intersubjectivity. So not like I study the ocean and birds, but like
Brian Vaughn. I'm sorry. Yeah,
okay.
he mentioned Ken Wilber, and Ken Wilber was one of the places. But it's broad in the literature. But Ken Wilber picked up on the idea, and I'm sure I encountered it in A Brief History of Everything, or one of his other books.
Is Ken Wilber an author? Like a school
author? He's the kind of quintessential Boulder, Colorado yogi, and author. But a very thoughtful guy. Probably not considered. No, he's not an academic, which for me is a virtue.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm not an academic either.
Yeah.
I wonder. I'm getting to the point in the show where it's hard for me to sit still.
That's okay. How long do you guys usually run these?
We usually do an hour and a half.
We start with an hour, and then if it's really awesome, we go longer. And I like going longer, but I also start now. I'm on a really high quality video camera, and it's hard for me to be not distracting while you're saying things.
Right.
Because I'm like, just want to.
Yeah. Well, we discussed.
I wanted to thank you guys for opening up the space and allowing me to participate. I've been, as I said, I've caught a few of these and chimed in on the stream a couple of times, and it's I think I got to watch my colleague Glenn on one, which was a lot of fun.
Right.
He came into the back when we were still at the station.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, so we
thanks
were
for having me.
Yeah, we were doing a scavenger hunt, as I told you when I initially approached you about the idea of being on the show, or you approached me about being on the show. Either way, I'm glad you're here. But I was talking about the idea.
I think I asked you, hey, can I be on your show?
What a compliment.
Wow.
So I was talking about the scavenger hunt. We're looking for the genius scavenger hunt.
He has already recommended Pat Mundy.
And you already recommended somebody, but there's
no limits on
we're
it,
taking
though.
more than one recommendation. Although we are, we're kind of taking a bit of a break while we're traveling, and we're going to be doing on the road podcast with our on the road
with
travel
my little
kit.
mobile kit. So we'll only be able to interview people that we are physically in the room with.
Right, but in June we'll be back, and we have extra cameras, so we'll be able to have switchers and be able to have people in the studio. So we're getting closer and closer. So thanks for being a part of our social distance Zoom edition of the early phase of season 2 of Post-Orthodoxy.
All right, we'll all go meet for a beer right after this.
I would do that.
Don't we?
Yeah.
Social distance.
Yeah.
Did we already
socially distance, of course.
Did we already have?
We're all in the same town.
I know, right? No, we wanted to have you in the station. In the station. Okay. In the studio.
In the studio.
But I don't have my second and third cameras hooked up.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully we can have future conversations. I would look forward to that.
Yes. I would like to for fun.
And you can recommend more than one person is the whole point. So let's find the smartest people we know.
Who are you looking? What do you want to talk about?
We're looking for the smartest people we know.
Whoever you think you're smart.
Yeah.
Who do you think is smart?
For me, it's like it's not necessarily a topic. It could be on cryptocurrency. It could be on etymology. It could be. It doesn't matter. I just want to find people who give a damn about something.
Yeah.
And then can turn me onto it a bit.
I would They're two of my close friends, and the two smartest people that I know are Pat Monday and Matt Vincent.
Oh yeah,
sweet. Let's do it.
We'll reach out.
Yep.
Cool. And we're gonna be doing this for a while. Maybe we'll have you back on again soon. We're not gonna get through it all.
No, I want to have repeat conversations.
Yeah.
Eventually, we'll be doing more than 2 shows a week, and so we will be able to have more guests.
Yeah. So
I think it takes 3,300 episodes before you get through it all.
That's
3,300.
Just a guess.
We got time.
Joe Rogan's almost there.
Oh my God!
Geez.
Right.
Crazy.
Yeah, he's doing 4-hour podcasts.
Almost through it all. He must have a really comfy chair.
Yeah.
No, I'm starting to get antsy here too.
Yeah, I know. We're all of a kind there when it comes to that. Yeah.
Well, let's leave him wanting more. Thanks for coming on the show. Thanks for having the conversation with us.
Yes.
And we'll be.
Appreciate you both.
Yeah.
I'll be back maybe next Tuesday for a rando show.
Yeah, we'll figure it out. It's going to be
Dark
awesome.
without Ainsley. Well, I don't know. I probably won't actively listen. I'll just rant for like an hour and a half.
Thank you, Chad. Thank you to Zachary Gray on YouTube, and thank you to Cole Auton in the UK.
Thanks for everybody who commented.
All of our friends on Facebook.
And again, thanks to everybody who helped support the building of this station. We're looking forward to serving you with it. And we'll see you next Tuesday.
Yeah. Have a good night.
Yeah.